All right, afternoon, gang. How we doing? Pete here. Another stream this week on something that I think is really important to talk about. Yesterday was a big day for Bitcoin and Bitcoin ETFs. I did a video last Tuesday where I talked about this potentially happening, and the Bitcoin price yesterday's done really, really well. I think we saw like a 2,000 point move in the Bitcoin prices. But what I wanted to do is basically just do a very brief live this afternoon to talk about the ProShares Bitcoin ETF that went live yesterday. There are Bitcoin ETFs and products, exchange traded products, but this is the first one that is in the US markets with SEC seal of approval. So I wanted to talk through a couple of things that I think are very, very important because I've had a number of people message me already to ask, how can I get into it? Um, I want to get into it. It looks really, really good. But let's just kind of like pause for a second and go through some of the key things that you need to know. I will be linking some resources right after this is finished and uploaded for you to go and read. I would strongly recommend that you go and read them and take that alongside what I'm going to explain in this kind of like live as I don't know, a means for research for you to make your own decision. And that's the most important thing. It's not going into anything blind, it's making sure that you're fully abreast with how things work, so on and so forth. If you are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. We'll try and keep this brief, maybe about 15-20 minutes max. If you aren't subscribed already, check out the channel and consider subscribing. If you do enjoy this stream, then make sure that you smash that like button for me as well and share it also. That will really, really help me. I will also leave some freebies down in the comments pinned. If you're looking for some free shares, we've got some free shares with Stake, free shares with Free Trade as well. And Invest Engine, who are a DIY investors platform. Literally, it is free investing for DIY investors. They give you access to ETFs. They are actually giving away a £50 sign up bonus for new people who are using them. So I will leave the links to all of those below. But let's get started with the ProShares Bitcoin ETF. Now, if I look at some of the charts for yesterday, and I'm just going to go on to this one right here and share this with you. This was the Bitcoin valuations from like yesterday. So we saw a little bit of a move here. And today, well, today it's trading a little bit down. But if you look at some of the news, you will find, and there was a really interesting article that I found earlier today talking about the volumes. This is likely one of the biggest ETFs ever launched. I mean, it says here there were 12 million shares that changed hand to the value of almost $500 million. So this was a very, very popular ETF. And you know what? For good reason. You know, Bitcoin has been in the conversation now for a very, very long time. And as Bitcoin is Bitcoin and there is a craze around crypto at the moment, having an ETF that is signed off by the SEC is a really big thing for Bitcoin and something that will excite retail investors. And that article went on to say that most of that was actually from retail investors. Interestingly, in the States, the ticker symbol for this ETF is BITO, so BITO. Interestingly, in the States, if you were to invest in that ETF, you could actually have it within tax efficient wrappers. So they're Roth IRAs, so on and so forth. What that basically means here in the UK is that technically speaking, if you bought this ETF, you could have it into an ISA wrapper, technically speaking. I'll come on to accessing this in the UK because I'm still looking around to see where you would actually access it. But let's move on to some of the important stuff. So this is not an ETF like other ETFs. It's not a traditional ETF. And what I mean by that is this is an exchange traded fund. Yes, it's traded on an exchange, so you can get in and get out of your position. However, it is based on futures contracts. So for those of you who don't know what a futures contract is, a futures contract is basically an agreement to buy an asset at a particular price in the future. Whereas before with ETFs and traditional ETFs, what you'll do is, for example, if we use the S&P 500, the VUSA, or the IUSA, which is the BlackRock version of that, you are buying the S&P 500 and you are holding the allocation to the businesses within the S&P 500, essentially. There are no future contracts involved in that kind of arrangement. This BITO, the BITO, the ProShares Bitcoin ETF, is based on futures contracts. So in other words, they will be taking out contracts to buy Bitcoin at a certain value in the future. That can be problematic because it doesn't necessarily trade on the spot price of Bitcoin at any given time. They may have a contract that says we'll buy Bitcoin in 3 months' time at X amount. So if, for example, they say we're going to buy Bitcoin in 3 months' time at $100,000, and in 3 months' time it's worth $120,000 a coin, then obviously they're getting a massive discount on the amount that they purchase by using the futures contract. But conversely, if they say we're going to buy it for $100,000 and Bitcoin values fall back down to 40,000, then obviously there's a big swing in between there. And I think that is really important to understand first and foremost if you're looking to go and buy this. I'm going to share with you in a moment the prospectus, because the prospectus is really, really important. And I would strongly encourage every single one of you, if you're looking to invest in this, make sure you read the prospectus. Now, ETFs are typically very low cost, and I'm talking, 0.23%. If you're looking at traditional ones within Vanguard, the ProShares ETF is not like that. I'm just going to show you this. This is their prospectus, and this is the fee for this ETF. So the fee for this has an annual fee of 0.95%, so just under 1%. So this is way more expensive than any other typical ETF that you actually might find on the market. And this doesn't actually give you the full picture of all of the charges that are incorporated or involved with holding this ETF if you do decide to invest in it. So for example, it isn't going to include things like transaction costs and storage costs. So futures contracts are typically used for things like oil, right? And if you go and buy oil, or you have a contract to buy oil, you're not going to store oil in your house. So there are storage fees involved with this. Same thing applies here. And that 0.95% that you're looking at here does not include any transactional or storage or any other fees that may come along with it. So essentially what that basically means is that this is a very, very expensive way to access Bitcoin. Personally, I feel as though, because it's one of the first ones that's been approved by the SEC and available on the American markets, that this is choppy because it's one of the first ones, and it's expensive because it is one of the first ones. I would argue that perhaps as more and more come online, it will get cheaper and more cost efficient. But at the moment, this is an extremely expensive way of accessing Bitcoin. In fact, you're better off still at this point in time holding your Bitcoin with Coinbase, eToro, whoever it is that you're using to purchase your Bitcoin. It's cheaper using those than it is buying this ETF at this given time. And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind. The next thing that I do want to show you is also within this prospectus. I will link this down below, by the way, guys. And this is just to highlight this section right here, which basically says that the fund does not directly invest in Bitcoin. So this is not going to be buying Bitcoin and storing Bitcoin. No, this is a futures contract. So it is purchasing Bitcoin based on, it's using futures contracts to be able to get access to Bitcoin, but it's never going to directly invest or hold Bitcoin specifically. Now, there has been some commentary out of the States in terms of why this is a futures ETF. According to the SEC were more comfortable with this being a futures ETF and functioning within the futures framework from a regulatory point of view. It was the only way that it was going to get approval. The SEC feel as though it offers more consumer protections, and they're able to oversee it regulate it a little bit more than if it were to be a traditional ETF where you would literally go and buy the Bitcoin, hold the Bitcoin, because they will be getting those Bitcoins from unregulated exchanges. And remember, from an SEC point of view, the whole relationship between exchanges and regulation, because a lot of them aren't regulated right now, is where there's a point of contention. So this is kind of compromising and I guess being clever in terms of how it's been able to invest in Bitcoin, have regulatory sign off by the SEC, but there are still pitfalls within this. And if you are going to invest in this will be my last kind of point. There are a lot of risks involved with this. And going back to the prospectus from page 4 onwards, there is quite a lengthy part of this which talks about principal risks. So, principal risk, they talk about investment strategy risk. The fund invests in Bitcoin futures and contracts and other instruments that provide exposure to Bitcoin futures. The fund does not invest directly in or hold Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin futures should be expected to differ from the current cash price of Bitcoin, which in sometimes referred to as the spot price of Bitcoin. So spot price, what you're buying it at. Consequently, the performance of the fund should be expected to perform differently from the spot price of Bitcoin. And again, the reason for that is because essentially they are using futures. So they're taking out contracts to essentially buy Bitcoin at certain prices in the future. And because obviously Bitcoin is quite volatile and it moves quite dynamically, it means that essentially you could have a very big difference between when their contracts expire and are renewed versus the actual spot price of Bitcoin at any given time. I would strongly recommend anybody to read through this. It talks about market volatility and risk, liquidity risk. This was one of the big concerns of from the SEC when looking at these kind of things, liquidity risk, because obviously it's using futures. Is there going to be enough money in the pool to satisfy contracts? One thing that this thing does point out, though, and it's on the previous page if I can find it, is it is a standardized cash settled Bitcoin futures contract that they're looking at. So they are going to be using cash specifically. That adds a little bit of comfort, but you're still going to have quite a lot of risk. And to be honest, when you're reading through prospectuses like this, they are extremely, how can I put this, blunt in regards to the risk. And as you will see, there's quite a few risks that they highlight here. So if you're going to be looking at accessing this at any point in the future, then you need to really spend some time reading this document, which is the prospectus. Again, I will link it down below. I think ultimately for me, and I did do a video about this last Tuesday. If you've not watched it, definitely go and watch it. I think that having these ETFs available to trade are a good thing in terms of institutional money and maybe that wider adoption and acceptance of Bitcoin as an asset class now. But looking at this specific ETF, I'm not going to buy this. I wouldn't buy this. And this leads me on to where can we get this in the UK? I don't know anywhere at the moment where you can access this in the UK. I've not been able to find anywhere just yet. I'll continue to do a little bit of research. And if I do find something, then obviously I'll do a video where I actually just explain, or maybe do a live where I kind of give you access to or links to some of those platforms. But it is expensive. Way more expensive than what you would expect for an ETF. And therefore, for me, I feel as though it would still be better to buy your Bitcoin on Coinbase, eToro, or whoever it is that you're using, rather than in getting access to your Bitcoin here. What this will do, though, and this is where I think that it really will have merit, is it will allow for further diversification for some of the professional institutions and maybe financial advisors and investment managers. It will allow them to be able to invest into Bitcoin within a regulated framework. And if you watch the video from last Tuesday, I kind of said, in order for, I believe, this is my opinion, and I'm sure there will be many people who will disagree with me on this. And if so, that's great. It's okay to have difference of opinions. I believe that in order for Bitcoin to get to, that really lofty price of 400,000, 500,000 pounds, dollars a coin, you're going to need institutional money, and this is just the start. there are more ETFs just like this. I think there's an Invesco one, which I believe could be going live today or tomorrow. And there's others that are in the pipeline to be approved through November and December. So this is the very, very first one of them. And obviously, the first one isn't going to be perfect, in my opinion. I think as we see more of these come online, it will become more cost efficient. So that 0.95% fee that you're seeing at the moment for this, the annual cost of this ETF, that will be driven down as more and more of these things come to market. But I think it's an interesting development, but it's not something that I'm going to be buying at this point in time, even if I could access it here in the UK. I'm going to continue to buy Bitcoin and my other sort of cryptocurrencies via the traditional routes. But if you do want to go and have a look at this, like I said, I'm going to link the prospectus down below. Definitely go and have a look at it. If you look at the performance of the ETF yesterday, it actually did really, really well. It is up, well, 4.85%. It was up yesterday. Now, because it's going to be very, very volatile, this might actually tumble today. Who knows? We don't really know. But the fact that this is available and it is something that people can invest in, I think is a really, really good thing. But those are just some takeaways. I hope you found this useful. Leave a comment in the comments if you find any other resources that you think people might benefit from. Make sure that you link them here. Kiki, welcome. Thank you so much for watching this. And yeah, guys, if you did enjoy this, we'll do more of these. It will be a regular thing on the channel where I do a live, maybe on a piece of news or something like that I think might be relevant. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, make sure you smash the like button, leave a comment. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. There are some freebies that I will link in the comment section below around some free shares and a £50 bonus with Invest Engine. So guys, whatever you're doing this afternoon, make sure that you have a great day. I will catch you later on.